This is the REM Show, and I'm Sean Rowley, lender with Caliber Home Loans, 15622, licensed in Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. My NMLS number is 2003-532.
I'm Rebecca Donaldson, realtor with Realty One Group Willamette Valley, and my license number is 2012-134-5555. And we are back with Realtors Escrow and Mortgage. And Sean and I have a special guest today. We have Doug Blackwell with IPX 1031 Exchange. Doug, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here. It's always been a pleasure working with you guys, and every time I come on this podcast with you, my phone just goes crazy. So I'll come anytime you ask me to be here.
Do I get a referral fee for that?
I was going to talk to you about that. I do. Next time I'm up there. I'm not kidding. Oh.
That works.
So anyway,
fee in the form of happy hour drinks and
there you go. Really good Mexican food and margaritas.
That's what I'm talking about.
There you go. We're there. Just say when.
Nice. But it's always a pleasure, guys.
Yes. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so we're really excited about the show and having Doug back on again. Like Doug was saying, it's a hot topic. And he's going to really enlighten us and open up the doors for those investors out there, those with properties, whether it's an investment property, a personally owned, or primary residence. There's going to be some key takeaway points on this, especially in today's market. So with that, Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself. What excites you about 1031 Exchange? I guess your back of your baseball card stacks.
Yeah, got it. Well, just to get the stats out of the way first, I've been in the business full time for about 22 years now. And I found this, it found me, it really did. I was a state financial planner working for firms like Merrill Lynch, and I couldn't solve my clients' biggest problems where their biggest assets were for real estate. I found out about this thing called 1031 Exchange in 1997. And by 1999, my business was blowing up doing just 1031. So in that short 22 years, I've done over 22,000 transactions. And my firm I sold back in 2016 to my current company, IPX, and I've been working with them for the last 6 years, and they are the largest 1031 company operating in the U.S. today. Very pleased to be here because I haven't got to worry about anything. I can just do what I do, and that's help people save money on taxes.
I love it. So you're kind of you're kind of new at this then, huh?
Kind of. Well, I will be honest with you, Rebecca. Here's the funny thing. 95% of my transactions are, Doug, I got a pretty simple transaction except for one thing. Except for one thing.
Always except for one thing.
Except for one thing, and we got to dig through that one thing. But no, it's a very exciting. It's been a very rewarding career, working on some clients of third generation money, passing it to the estate. And what I do, what really charges me up is that I was always told as an estate financial planner that tax-deferred compound growth is the best way you could invest. So invest in your IRAs and maximize your 401ks, tax-deferred compound growth. Then I found out about this thing called 1031, and I could get tax-deferred compound growth on my real estate. I'm like, okay, I'm all in. And that's what's been so exciting. And that really is, I'm a long-term thinker. When I'm listening to a client speak to me, I know what they're trying to do today, but I'm thinking, I already know the road they're on, you know, and where they're heading. And my job is to really help them stay on the path correctly and not veer off of it too far. So.
Very, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Now, I guess to start it out real quick, so when we're talking about investment properties and you're selling one, that's where you'll utilize your 1031 exchange in purchasing your new property. Now, is there a timeline that you have to have a new purchase in mind and a certain date that you have to close by?
You know, that's a great question. And here's the interesting thing. I'm hoping all your listeners listen to me carefully. Don't do research about 1031 exchange on the internet. You'll drive yourself crazy. Just give me a call. We can talk about it. It's nuts. These timelines are part of the problem. I mean, if you look at them, they look very daunting, but if you understand them, they're not that hard to work with. And how they are is it really, when you sell an investment property, once it closes, we're going to receive the money. Because if you're an investor doing a 1031 exchange, you can't touch that cash. If you touch it, it's taxable. Our job is to transfer that cash for you to the property you want to buy. So the timelines start when you close, not when you accept the offer, but we have to be involved. Once right after you accept the offer and set up escrow, that's when you want to call someone like me to set up your exchange account with your title company.
Yep.
At the close, you only have 45 short calendar days after you close to let us know by an identification statement what it is you want to buy. If you're not certain it's going to work out, you got to throw a backup or two on that list. So that's one of the daunting numbers that it scares people. They only have 45 days to find a property, and that's not really true. The total amount of time you have to do a 1031, as you know, is 180 calendar days. But the first 45 days, you have to let us know what the heck you're going to buy. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I can answer lots of questions about why the IRS does certain things, but why they pick this 45-day thing, for the life of me, this is the one thing I can't figure out. So it's just rough. So I tell my clients, Rebecca, your clients come to me all the time talking to me about how they're structuring the deal, and you know all about this timeline.
Yeah.
And you know when you're accepting that offer, that's a critical timeline to say, is your client ready to make a decision on a property? And if they're not, you can't accept a fast close. You got to buy 30 days or 60 days before the close.
Yep.
And buying that extra time for them, you've done everybody a world of favor, because then, it's free time to look around. You can always secure a property before you sell your property. Very easy. But once you close, you get sneakers on.
Is there a limit on how many properties they can identify? Because you just mentioned
another
have a
huge
backup.
mistake.
Yeah,
because here's another one that really gets people. They go on the internet and they see this 3 property thing. Sure, in fact, that's probably 95% of your transactions, where if you're buying one large property with all of your money, by the way, you have to reinvest all of the cash from the sale, and you have to replace the value of any debt paid off. People think they only have to reinvest proceeds in cash. That's not the case. It's pretty much the total sales price of the property you're selling. So the way it works is, if you're going to buy one big property with all your money, the 3 property rule is the best way to go. You can identify up to 3 properties of any value anywhere in the country. You don't have to identify 3, but you can. So if you get out there to day 45 and you're not certain the one you're working on is going to close, throw a backup or 2 on the list. That's cool.
perfect.
But what if you sell something big, like a $2 million ranch for cash, and you want to buy 8 $250,000 houses? Well, you'd like to be the broker for that transaction, I'm sure, but that's not 3 properties, that's 8 properties. How the heck do you do that? Well, it's simple. You fall over to a thing called the 200% rule. If you do want to identify more than 3, you can. But once you identify the 4th property or more, you're capped at 200% value of what you sold. So in my example of $2 million, you could identify 100 properties if you want, but the cumulative value of all of the properties can't be more than $4 million in my example of a $2 million sale. So it works extraordinarily well to go back and forth and to be able to just go into this transaction, Rebecca, and to say, let's not worry about the timelines. Let's worry about what you want to do with your money. If you could write the rules, let's go make that happen. Being your agent, I will find the best real estate for you, and I'll shove you in front of Doug, and he'll take care of this identification thing later. Let's go find the right real estate. So it works out really well that way.
And that's so true, because we had a client that we worked mutually with. I referred them over to you. I sold their fourplex here in Oregon, and they ended up, I think, 1.2 million plus that we sold it for. And then they ended up in Idaho and bought a couple of properties over there with their Idaho agent. But, they were under the impression that they had to buy another fourplex. But they don't have to do that.
There's another one for you.
Yep.
Yeah, but like kind, because here's the funny thing. You see this thing, 1031 exchange has got to be like kind property. Well, that's another thing. If you read on the internet, it's going to throw you a curveball, because like kind in 1031 exchange, because they got rid of the ability for me to exchange all the other cool stuff I used to exchange, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act says I can only exchange real property. So if you have real property, whether it's a duplex, a single family home, a piece of raw land, a commercial property, shopping center, a windmill, oil rights, it is real property. You exchange it for real property. So you can switch it around. You can go from a duplex to a commercial property.
Yep.
You can go from a commercial property and buy 16 houses if you want to.
Yep. It's really cool, honestly. I don't think people...
It's powerful.
It really is. I don't think enough people are aware of what an amazing, program it is. Tax saving.
Mm-hmm. So now that's tax deferment. So is there a use limit, or as long as it is tied up within the property, or you roll it into another one, is there a cutoff for the timeline for this deferment, or as long as it's invested, it's non-taxable?
As long as you remain invested and do not take the money personally or convert an asset to be used personally and then try to sell it, and get the money out, that's when the cash and trigger, the taxes are due. But just to remember again, the limit to the amount you can defer is unlimited. But what ends up happening is once you pass away, the value of your estate comes into play of what the estate taxes might look like. Now, currently you can die with $11.7 million and the federal government will leave you alone, each taxpayer. And in the state of Washington or Oregon, I believe it's $1 million you can die with, and they won't fool with you. And it's 10% above $1 million.
Only $1 million? That's not very much. Wow.
Well, but it's only a 10% tax above it, and the feds don't leave you alone for 11.7 or 23.4 million dollars. And if you have that kind of money, you can hire an attorney to take care of this problem. I promise you. But well, yeah, and what's real important to know is, I just know that if we kick the can down the road far enough that we can pass this on to our families or do what we want with it this way, there's ways to get money out of your properties too. And you being a Caliber Home Loans, you know all about refinancing properties and pulling cash out. Are those loans taxable? They're not.
Right.
And just because you did a 1031 exchange, you do not want to do a loan for cash out around the same year you do an exchange. But let's say I owned a property for 10 or 15 years. It's a good rental. I want some money. It's fully paid for. Let's throw $200,000 on a loan on that thing. Let the tenant pay that loan off, and I'll take that cash and go around the world 20 times. You can do what you want with that money. And that part of it, to me, instead of just selling it and paying the tax, you lose the asset. In my world, yeah, you might pay the tax if you want to. But my job is to say you really have to want to, because I'm going to give you 100 reasons why you don't want to. And but I'll also tell you, my job is also to talk you out of doing a 1031 exchange. It has to be the best option.
Yeah, true. What's new in the 1031 exchange world? Anything?
There's lots. If your listeners will stick around to the third or fourth segment, I'm going to go into something that's gotten super, super hot. And it's one of the things you definitely want to stick around and listen to, but I don't want to try to mix it up too much. So that's what the new properties people are doing. But with the actual 1031 exchange, Rebecca, unfortunately, it's still like Groundhog Day. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Same rules, same regs, same things over and over again, and they don't change them. We want to make sure of it. In fact, the new tax laws, I guess they call it not the recession, but the Inflation Act. I'm sorry, the Inflation Reduction Act. Did I say Inflation Act? That they just passed. Sorry about that.
It is.
They just passed that. We were worried they were going to try to slip in some of those tax changes, the 1031 exchange, real estate, the estate taxes. They did none of that. They left it all alone again. And just to the listeners, listen carefully. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been challenged over 5 times by different administrations as they threaten to get rid of us. The value we provide to an economy is massive. If someone sells a piece of real estate, they can because they don't pay taxes, they will. Guess what happens? They have to reinvest all the money. They stay invested. The money stays in the economy. They buy something. They're not going to let it sit there and be junk. They're going to fix it up. So they got to hire a contractor. They got to buy materials. They hire a realtor to sell the property and buy a property. They get a commission. I get a fee. Title company gets a fee. The appraiser gets a fee.
Yep.
The inspector gets a fee. Everybody gets a fee. And guess what the IRS charges on your income tax? A tax much higher than you get from the sale of that piece of property if there's a 15% federal tax. So the amount of money we generate for the federal government's massive. And when they start seeing that, they go, if we get rid of those guys, I know I talk to so many people, and you can almost hear them pounding their fist on the table. If I have to pay my tax, I'm just not going to sell. And that's a fact. They know that if they die, it goes to their estate tax-free. So why sell? Then watch what happens to the economy. I promise you, the amount of business that we do, billions of dollars every year, it's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, how many transactions do you do a year?
Well, which year? Because I got to tell you something. 2020, I thought I was going to be sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I did for 2 months, but then that was a record year for me.
Isn't that crazy?
2020, oh, it's nuts. In 2021, I mean, literally a couple thousand.
Wow.
And so, I'm not a big player in this space. And our company, that's just me in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
So we'll come back from break. We'll talk about that again. So.
Okay, and we'll be back with Realtors, Escrow, and
Mortgage.
There you go. With
Go
for it.
The music's still playing kind of loud there. I can barely hear you. That's okay.
Real estate, escrow, and mortgage. We've got Doug on the line
Sean.
still. Yes.
Yes, if we could spend a little time on this segment, I want to talk about lending in 1031, if that's okay with you,
Absolutely.
because that's another piece of this. If people understood how financing, it's cheap money, and how to utilize that in a 1031, and some of the things people are doing today that could cause problems if they're not careful. Okay?
Sure,
I
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
it. Yep.
So yeah, because I mean, I'm a player in all fields, and I like bringing all the tools to the table. And financing, cash, money is the number one piece of this whole game. So, when I'm doing a 1031, like I mentioned, you should replace the debt in the transaction. If you had debt, you really should replace the debt or bring the value of the debt in cash. Now, obviously, if you want to not have any debt, you pay it off. But the bottom line is, a lot of people don't feel that they have to replace the debt. And here's what happens. Let's say we sell a property for $550,000, and we have some closing costs, real estate commissions, money back to the buyer to fix things, and our fee of $1,100 title work. It's traditional 5.5–6% closing costs, and so or 7%. At the end of the day, let's say the deal falls at $500,000 is the net sales price after expenses. Well, that is what the net sales price is, and the replacement value for the exchange. But let's say you have a $200,000 loan on the property. That gets paid off too, and you have net proceeds of only $300,000. Pretty simple math, right? Well, people read on the internet that you only have to reinvest the net proceeds, the net sales price. Well, they throw their heads out and think it's only have to reinvest profit, reinvest the cash or proceeds or whatever, and they also think that the debt is an expense to the close, and it's not. It's an obligation. So the client calls you, Rebecca, and says, I got $300,000 hot dollars at the exchange company. Got 45 days. Let's get busy. I got my running shoes on. I got my backpack and water in the car. Let's go. And you go find the perfect property. You buy it for cash for $301,000. You break bread, drink wine, and go your separate ways. A year or two later, the client calls me and says, Doug, I did an exchange with your company 2 years ago, and I just got a tax bill from the IRS for $77,000. They said I didn't buy enough property. I said, you probably didn't. Did you have debt? They said, well, yes. I said, you need to replace the value of the debt. So they get really upset. I mean, you would be shocked to know how many people think otherwise. So just remember that net price is what it is. Now, back to the lending side of the equation. When I do a 1031 exchange, if you read on the internet, it says you should not refinance that property before or after that exchange the same year. You should never do it. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to debunk that one really fast. You shouldn't do it if you're going to cash out and put the money in your bank account, pay off your personal debts, or go on vacation or buy a car, doing things like that. But if you're going to refinance the property you're selling, for example, take an equity line of credit against it to fix it up, to get it ready for sale. Maybe you're going to sell it next year and want to do an addition to it. Something like that's perfectly fine if the money's going to stay employed into your investments. And it doesn't have to be to the property you're selling. Another case would be, let's say you sold a property for $500,000 cash, and you buy a new property and pay $500,000 cash for it. And 2 weeks later, Rebecca, I know you, because your clients call me and complain about this. They say, hey, we found the perfect property, but it went pending before Rebecca could get over there and get it done. I mean, she was driving over, it was gone. You heard that story 1,000 times, right?
Yep.
Well, guess what? That property went away, so they settled on another one that was second best. Still a great property, but I know you're a hawk. You call him back 2 weeks later, hey, the dude that was buying it couldn't qualify for his loan, or he got transferred for his job, or they looked at the property, said they don't want to live there. It went back on the market. And the client says, I love that property, but I put all my money in the other one. What do I do? And then you read on the internet, you can't refinance right after an exchange. So you sit with your twiddling your thumbs, and that's not the case. You could refinance that property right away as long as you're going to buy another investment or there was a business purpose for that loan. And that's the key to that. It's huge.
That is huge.
So, I mean, it's something that, especially right now with the market shifting, all of my clients that paid cash 3 to 6 months ago, they're sitting there going, I want to refinance and buy another one. Prices came back nicely. And that one I wanted came back. And look at this thing. I saved $75,000. It came down in price. So you can do that. Now, here's the negative to the loans. Currently, the rates have gone up, haven't they, Sean?
They have.
And as they go up, one of them
before this segment started.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of my clients come back and say, Doug, my client couldn't qualify because the rates went up and it put them out of their numbers. And I said, well, why don't you buy down the rate for them? Take a little bit of money and buy down the rate. You can do that, and take care of your client buying your property. Drop it $1,000 and give it to the lender, drop the rate down, get them back in line, and let them get the house. You can do that? I said, well, ask the lender if you could do it. I'm just saying you can do it with your cash. If you're an investor selling a property, that becomes a closing cost, which is eligible for deductions against your sales price, along with real estate commissions and everything else. Leaving money for the buyer, same thing. Those are closing costs. So why wouldn't you do that if you could help the client?
Yep.
In fact, I just negotiated a deal for myself where I said, look, I want closing costs. I know I only need 1,000 of them, but I said I want 2%, and I get the extra money for that. So buy my rate down for me. I took it from a 5.1 to a 4.7. Why not?
Yeah, why
so
not?
Anyway, but here's the negative to it. As the investor, I've now sold my property. That's a pretty cool trick. My client tricked me into asked me to buy his rate down. I'm going to make the seller of the property I'm buying on my 1031 exchange do the same thing. I'm going to give him an extra $1,000 on the price, and he's going to turn right back around and buy my rate down for me. Well, unfortunately, anything you receive as an investor on the buy side from the seller as closing costs, money left behind to fix things, anything that seller gives you as a benefit is going to be subject to tax. And I had a commercial property, get this, it was a big deal. They had to buy the rate down. It took them $47,000 to do it.
Wow.
They found out after the fact that was a taxable event.
Oops.
So it didn't save them the rate at all. It actually cost them more than the rate saved them. So please call me before you do things and talk to your tax advisors, for God's sake. Please talk to your accountants. That's the important thing I got to say.
I always tell my clients to call you first before we do anything.
Well, and thank you for that. And that's why I enjoy working with your clients so much, because we're not stressing out last minute trying to figure stuff out. We actually thought it out, and we're on a plan, and we even got a backup plan. And that's the secret to the success of anything. A little bit of planning goes a long way.
It's so true, especially in this industry.
Now, I've got a quick question, Doug. So we're talking about investment to investment, rolling the equity into a new purchase. We'll pick this up as we come back.
We'll be right back with Realtors, Escrow, and Mortgage. All right, we're back with Realtors, Escrow, and Mortgage, and we have our special guest today, Doug Blackwell with IPX 1031 Exchange. Hey, Doug, where can our listeners get a hold of you at? What's the best phone number?
The best way to reach me is my cell phone. You can Google me, but if you just call my cell, it's 503-367-6701. And if you put my name, Doug Blackwell, and that number in your phone, just put 1031 in my name, because I promise you'll probably forget it. You just type 1031 on your phone, and I promise to show up.
That's how you are in my phone. I'm just kidding.
It worked. You didn't forget my name. I know you didn't.
I know. I'm kidding. Too funny.
But
Okay,
anyway,
so Sean had a really good question before the break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so before the break, where I was going was other than selling an investment property, reinvesting that money, say you have a client that has a primary residence, they're selling it, and due to our current market, really the last couple of years, equity has skyrocketed. So now you're sitting on, say, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 worth of equity on your house, and you want to invest into an investment property. Can you still utilize a 1031 exchange on that investment property, or does it have to be investment to investment?
Again, great question, because a lot of people forget that with a primary residence, if you've never rented it out, if you lived in it and you're living in it when you're selling it, and you've been there at least 2 of the past 5 years, you can sell that residence for what you paid for it, plus up to $250,000 per taxpayer on title, and a husband and wife get $500,000. So if you have $400,000 in capital gains in the property, I would just sell it and take the cash and do what you want with it. But let's say, for example, though, like you mentioned, this market the last couple of years, it's not unheard of to have a $1 million property anymore. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you only paid $100 for it or $200 for it 10 years ago. Well, you do the math, you get $200,000 plus $500,000. That's only $700,000 tax free. What about the other $300,000? I want to do a 1031 exchange on that excess, so I don't have to pay taxes on it. I don't want to do that. Well, unfortunately, only investment properties qualify. But listen to this cool trick. This is what a lot of clients figure out, and some figure out too late. And this is what happens. If you want to do this trick and not pay any taxes on that sale, because as it currently stands, you're going to pay capital gains taxes, state, federal, and everything else on $300,000. You're going to lose about a third of that money. But if you're planning things correctly and you want to move out of that house and into another one, but rent that one out for a couple of years, a year to 2 years is all it takes. No longer than 2 years, though, and let me explain. You can rent it out to a family member. It's not a 1031 exchange yet. You can rent it out to anybody you want. You can do an Airbnb. You can do what you need to it. And if you need money for the purchase, you call Sean and get a loan on the property, pull the cash out, and go buy your house. Don't sell it yet. Okay? So 2 years go by. You've now been an investor of the property. And you still lived in it 2 of the past 5, haven't you? But now you've been an investor. When you're selling it, you're not living there anymore. It's an investment. You get both the 1031 exchange and the primary residence exclusion. And how that works is, at that point, the second year, please do not renew a lease if you have one, because you have to be out of that property before the end of the third year, because then you lose your primary residence exclusion if you go past the third. I know it's a lot to swallow in this conversation, but just trust me, get rid of it at year 2. That way you'll get everything you wanted from it, the $500,000 tax-free, and you'll do an exchange with the rest. And no taxes will be due. And you're already in your new home. You actually are doing really well. A lot of clients do just that. But what's sad is that I do hear a phone call about once a month, and for 22 years, once a month I get this. Doug, I'm selling an investment property, and it was my primary for a few years, but I moved out. I'll say, how many years? They said, well, it's about 3.5 ago. And the number 3.5 comes up a lot because people typically do the first year as a renter. It's pretty cool. It worked out. They renew that person's lease. It worked out really good. But then they renew to the third time. They're starting to get, this is just a trend. They get tired of being a landlord. Something bad happened by the third year. Something went wrong. So the tenant finally moved out at the end of the third year. The lease is over. They want out of the game. They're done with it. So they have to fix the property up. So a few months they fix the property up, list it for sale. A few months later it sells. There's your 3.5 years. Every darn time. And I just want to just do it at year 2. Get rid of them at year 2.
Get rid of them at year 2, not 3.5.
Now, any listener on the call that you're dealing with that right now and you just realize you're coming up on year 3 and you're going to have to deal with that, please call me. I will give you a solution to get rid of that problem really fast. And it's really slick and it doesn't cost you a dime.
I love it.
But you have to know how to do it. But I'm not going to say it publicly on the air because it'll be misunderstood by some. And someone will say, I heard it on Rebecca Donaldson's show and I got it recorded. Here it is. So.
That's so true.
So with a follow-up question onto that, so we talked about investment to investment. We talked about timelines, that 180 days, or that really more importantly, that 45 days to identify the property. Is there somewhere that you can park that money or invest that money to extend that timeline prior to moving it into a 1031?
Unfortunately, no. The parking function of it it's very difficult. Once you close a property, the clock starts. And you can't touch the funds. So it's going to be parked with us, and you're burning your clock up, letting it sit there. But there are, things you can do, such as a reverse exchange, if you would like to buy something first and then sell something later. That often is a great solution for many clients where I want to sell a property, but I want to buy one first, and I want to get that done. So if you do that, IPX will become what's called an EAT, an exchange accommodating title holder, and buy the property for your client and give them up to 180 calendar days to sell something. Once they sell their property, they take the equity from that for a down payment. They call Sean, and get the loan and get your deal and take out a takeout financing and buy it from us. That's the only thing we can do for you that way. But to actually physically put the money someplace and magically make it not be seen by somebody is impossible. That doesn't happen. So unfortunately, we can't just park cash.
Well, not necessarily hiding, but are there platforms where you would have multiple investors in a single property, whether it's a fourplex or an entire apartment complex, instead of you identifying the one property you're going to invest in, where let's say you have 10 other parties and you're just going to move your investment would be a portion of that, so you're not identifying the property. The property's already been identified.
Yeah. So so what ends up there? That's actually that's the last segment of this conversation today. They're called structured transactions. They're called how do I call it? Tenant common type investments. There are a lot of different ways. Delaware statutory trusts, but you're not parking. You're actually making an investment. Typically, you'll be holding it for a couple of years to qualify for the 1031. Because with a 1031, short-term investments are a no-no. You don't want to be a fix and flipper with 1031 exchanges. The property you're selling, you really should have held it for a couple of years, and the one you're going to buy, you should be intending to want to own it for a couple of years. It's just another investment, but that's a really big topic that I'd like to cover the last segment.
Okay.
Or this isn't the last, this is the third segment, isn't
This is
it?
the third. Yeah, we have this one and then the.
Yeah, that last segment is a place to go with the money where a lot of clients don't sell because they don't have a place to go. If I got to buy another rental house, I don't want to do that. I'm done. Where do I go? Or they're saying I sold my house and it was investment and I have $300,000 left over. What do I do with that $300,000 or $200,000? What do I do with it? There's a lot of solutions. There's
Now,
also another one for the primary. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So could you still expect a similar return, or in like those Maryland trusts or those larger group efforts, is it a smaller return on that investment?
Well, we have to define what that return would look like, because many people are fooling themselves when they say they're doing great with a rental house, because after they fix it up and how much money they spend on everything else, they end up with a 2% return, not really realizing how much they spent on it. But the bottom line is, I tell clients all the time, and I'll say it to everybody that calls me, if you're still, quote unquote, in the game, if you know how to manage properties, if you know how to take care of things, you know how to work tenants, you know how to be in the game, those products are not for you. But if you want to take a portion of your money and go to the sidelines, tap out, do something different, relax, change your lifestyle. By the way, changing your lifestyle is the number one reason my clients are exchanging. Those are the ones that I'm saying that are over age 60. They've already been in the game a long time. They want to calm down with a portion of their properties, or maybe they just don't want to be a landlord anymore. They want a lifestyle change. And there's several different ways that's happening. And that's that last segment I'll talk to you about, because that's critical. Why be an investor if you can't enjoy your life, right? It's not all about making money. And at some point, you've already got the money. Now, how do you enjoy it?
Right.
Now, if you're a young investor, do not go into a Delaware statutory trust. You are in the game for the long haul. You will make more money owning the physical real estate long haul. But like me, I'm 60 years old. I'm not on the end of my rope, but I'm not on that run where I can make big mistakes right now. So I got to be real careful. I'm very conservative, and I like those assets. So, and by the way, what's kind of interesting? A lot of clients don't know. A lot of people as investors don't know. They think making money, the growth of the house is what they want. Me as a real estate investor, I don't really want it to go up in value until I'm ready to die. The reason is that property taxes go up when that happens. And I don't want my property taxes going up and eating into my profits. But listen carefully what my clients think about all the time. In a 1031 exchange, you have to reinvest the money within 6 months. You got to let us know in 45 short days what you're going to buy. So if you sell something, you got to buy something. You can't be out of the market very long. So my clients say, I would love to buy low. Well, if they buy low in a 1031 exchange, that means they got to sell low. And they're saying to me, say up here, I'd love to sell high, but if I sell high, I got to do a 1031 exchange and buy high. So it's kind of a rough situation. You got to stay in the market. So it's interesting enough how it all works out, why they exchange. I'll cover that last segment.
Okay. We'll be back with Realtors, Escrow, and Mortgage.
Welcome back with REM. We've got Doug on the line, Rebecca, our favorite host. Doug, so we were just talking about buying high and selling high, buying low and selling low, and really your intent and the direction that you want to go utilizing your 1031.
Right, because the 1031, it's not about the growth of the asset. What my clients are doing are one of four things. They're going to sell their asset. If they can get better income by moving it to something else, that's the number one reason. I can buy a property that provides me better income. It's in a better area, because I've owned this one for 10 or 15 years. I want to exchange and get one in a better area that's growing better and has better income potential. That's number one. Number two is the property I've owned, the maintenance on it's getting to be a disaster. It's eating into all my profits. It's time to sell it. I'll fix it up and sell it and move on to a better, newer property. Or maybe I want to put it into a location, like I mentioned, that makes sense. Number three, though, is a really big one. I want to buy a property. I want to do a 1031 exchange, and I want to buy a property somewhere that I might want to retire in the future years. I can't buy a home to live in right away with a 1031. I can't occupy it as my primary residence for at least 2 years. But nothing to say after 2 years you can't convert it if you want to retire in the property or use the property for your personal use. The first 24 months you can't do that. So my clients are actually so many. Starting February of 2020, 1 out of every 3 exchange I did from the Pacific Northwest left the Pacific Northwest, and it went to one of 4 places. It went to Arizona, Texas, Florida, and
Tennessee.
It went to Tennessee.
Yep.
And it was absolutely, I mean, North Carolina is a big one and everything else. Yeah, it's crazy. And what they were doing is saying, look, if I don't buy something now for retirement, I might not be able to afford it in 3 or 4 years when I want to retire. I better go ahead and get it now. I'll make it a short-term Airbnb, and I'll move into it later. They didn't sell one house. They sold 2. They sold 3 because they could sell them in 3 minutes. Well, and because you can sell 3 and buy 1. You sell many and buy 1, and you can sell 1 and buy many if you want with a 1031 exchange. But that's another one of my examples of that lifestyle change. They're also buying vacation properties that they wouldn't mind vacationing in for personal use, but they just can't use it personally, but limited amounts for the first 2 years. If you buy a property with a 1031 exchange, your personal use should be limited to 14 days per year, or 10% of the time it was actually rented that year, whichever is greater. And you do have to rent it out at least 14 days per year to qualify. Not a big deal. But your personal use has to be limited those first 2 years. And you cannot, please listen to me carefully on this call. You cannot use a 1031 exchange simply to avoid taxation on the sale of an investment property so you can buy a house to live in. That's not the purpose of a 1031. But the 1031 can allow you to do an exchange, defer the taxes on a piece of property that you purchase that you may want to in the future be a candidate for someplace you want to live into. And you can convert assets after 24 months all day long. But your intent can't be to buy a home just to avoid the taxes with a 1031. That's not what it's for. Your intent must be for investment first. So it's pretty cool and pretty clear. But your CPAs, you know, Rebecca, you've got a lot of great ones too you've been referring out, and I've been kind of following your heels on a couple of them. And Sean, I'm sure you got a bunch of them too, because we're all in the same game. It's not about how much you make, it's how much can you keep, and how much you don't screw up getting there. So
what happens, Doug, if you get to that 45 days and they can't identify a property? Do they lose, or are they out some money?
No. What happens is, yes, if you don't identify any property and you fail the exchange at day 45 because you couldn't identify, the taxes would be due, absolutely.
Okay.
A lot of clients move to, again, the lifestyle change. One of those assets I want to talk to you about this last quarter, this last segment, is the Delaware Statutory Trust is something you have to look at and learn about. It is a very powerful tool to allow clients to go to the sidelines. And so many of my investors say, if I can do something like that, I wouldn't mind selling a few houses because I don't mind getting off the rodeo for a little bit. And that looks like a pretty stable asset. So again, it's also a great backup at day 45. If you can't find something, instead of losing a third of your money, going into a DST, you may not be ready to go into a DST, but these things have become a very good backup for a lot of my clients, and we're doing tremendous volumes in those assets. And sometimes I'll take you out to lunch and explain exactly what's going on with that, because it's a pretty powerful tool. I also want to mention the opportunity zone very quickly.
Okay.
The opportunity zone for a client that had that house, their primary residence, that had too much gain in it.
Yep.
Well, in that case, if you're an accredited investor, by the way, for a DST or an opportunity zone, you need to be an accredited investor to purchase it. It is a security. But the opportunity zone says it's not an investment like that. You only have to invest gain into an opportunity zone. And you get some pretty significant benefits for doing that. And it's not a 1031 exchange. You do have to make the investment within 180 days of when you sold your property, but there's no 45-day identification. And it's a very cool tool for many of my clients. And again, that's another asset class that when people learn what it is, they say, so if I sold my business and the building my business was in, I got to pay taxes on my business. Well, the answer is no. You can do an opportunity zone. And again, the taxes would be due at some point. But for the purpose of this conversation on the air, I got to say that an opportunity zone, the taxes are due. I can't deny that. But many of the projects you're investing into will pay the tax bill for you. And that's a very important fact to understand. So again, I really look forward to working with everybody. And I was thinking maybe, Rebecca, just while we're on the call, let's throw it out to your investors. You work with so many people. It's crazy. Why not, if you want? How could I help out? Maybe I could throw some dollars at a nice event we do and have some of your best clients and some of your investors on the show. Maybe come out and enjoy a little bite to eat. We'll do a little song and dance in the room and have some fun and answer questions live. What do you think? I could throw money at that all day long.
There you go.
If you want to ask me how I can give back, let's do something like that.
I like
love, because people, the ones that are on this call listening to it, they're saying, how do I figure this out? It's not a bad idea to have fun while you're trying to figure it out.
And that's so true. So if you're listening to this call and you want to, get together with us, Doug, how do they get a hold of you?
503-367-6701 is my cell, and trust me, the phone call is all we need to do. We don't need to do a face-to-face for just a conversation. But for the event I'm talking about, that would be fun to do.
That would be fun.
But just 99% of my stuff is over the phone. And if it gets weird, I got to start drawing pictures. I'll come out and visit with you.
I've got the dry erase board.
We like doing events. So, yeah, that's good. Yeah. We'll get together either tomorrow or the next day and talk about, putting something together.
I like it.
I like it.
Yep.
I like it. So, Phil, if you're listening, expect a phone call.
Nice. Well, I got to tell you too, the market is shifting quite a bit, and I do have some good news. I have some good news for the listeners.
Okay.
So much money left the last 2 years and went everywhere else, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just the Pacific Northwest that went to Florida and Arizona. Right now, you can't buy there and make anything cash flow. Prices are so ridiculously high. It doesn't make sense. But in the same breath, right here in Oregon, the rental market the rents are just the highest in the country.
It's crazy.
The cash flows are the best here. Guess what's happening? They're coming back. So now it's like I have a lot of exchanges coming back across the state lines back into Oregon and Southwest Washington and up in this area. So it's just a money game. It's just where the money flows and ebbs, and people say, I'm getting out, and they come kicking and screaming, coming back. So
isn't that crazy?
It keeps us all employed.
It sure does, yeah.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, too, because you got those investors coming back because those rental properties are open back up.
Yep.
You have rents going through the roof, so those renters are now wanting to buy, saying, hey, Rebecca, find me a house. Well, you need to talk to Sean over at Caliber. Yep. And now that rental property opens back up.
Yep. How do the listeners get a hold of you, Sean?
Listeners can get a hold of me by calling 503-789-5811.
And you can reach me at 503-269-0747. How many minutes do we have left? 2? 1.5. Okay.
Well, just remember, all you listeners, if you need to get a hold of me or anybody, just call Rebecca. She can get us.
Yeah, yep, that's for sure. Yep. You can also go to my website, RebeccaScottHouses.com. Oh, that was a fast one.
This was fun again. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Doug, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we'll have you back again.
You bet.
All right.
Hurry up.
Thank you. Have a good evening.